All right, so let's talk about fantasy football. If a lot of you are playing fantasy football like we are, I'm sure you have either done your fantasy draft already or probably have it coming up real soon with the season about to start. So, figured one thing we would do was a little segment here that was fun. Next week, I plan to do quarterbacks, but this week we're going to do running backs. In my opinion, the most important position, a position that I always personally address in the first round of the draft. I always personally try to get a running back that's going to give good opportunities and a lot of touches in both the out of the backfield and also receptions. So obviously, with that being said, there's a lot of running backs that really excel at that. I'm going to talk about 5 running backs that I would personally stay away from, and tell you why, and then 5 that I think that you should definitely select early on in your fantasy draft. Okay. You have anything to say, bud?
I guess not. I mean, I don't know what the
Okay.
five are yet. So
Okay. Fair enough. No, we can just discuss them as we go here.
I'm
Okay.
also no fantasy master. So I mean, I'm fucking,
All
like,
good, bud. All good. Yeah, I mean, Nick, for the record, just started playing. Last year was his first year, so this is his second
yeah,
year.
yeah. So,
So he
but
did
I
all
will
right, though.
say,
He did
David
pretty
has
well.
given me nothing but good advice in regards to fantasy. Like he definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to picking
I try,
fantasy.
I try, I try to.
I
I
would
try to.
definitely say,
Yeah, I mean, like there's a strategy to it. I mean, it's part about like looking at the matchups, and we'll get into that more in coming weeks because I think that this will be a segment that people really like because everybody is playing fantasy now. So yeah, so let's get into it. 5 running backs to avoid in 2022. So at the top of my list, I'm going to put Zeke Elliott. With fantasy, I always play, totally unbiased. Like I will take
I
a
like the
Pittsburgh
pick though.
Steeler. Yeah, I'll take a Pittsburgh Steeler. I'll take a Dallas Cowboy. I'll take, a Las Vegas Raider. I don't care who
Right.
you play for as long as you're a productive player. But let me tell you why I'm not sold on Zeke. So last year, Zeke played on a torn PCL last year. So he still played. He's still relatively productive, but even then, he saw a career low in touches per game. So he saw on average 16.7 touches per game, and then that's down from about 3 touches from the previous season, and then 5 touches in seasons before that. So the
I remember
Cowboys
seeing
started to
something
utilize.
about him, some kind of
Yeah,
like a graphic where he's gotten progressively worse each year, basically.
yeah, and he's right now he's making 12.5 million a season. So next to Derrick Henry, he's the second highest paid running back. So his production does not match
Not
the
at
uh,
all.
the money. But Jerry Jones, obviously, just he's been a long time player. He's been good for him. He's been really good for that franchise. Jerry wants to reward him, and Jerry, for nothing else, I talk a lot of shit about Jerry Jones, but the man is pretty loyal to his players for the most part if he likes you. Um, so yeah, um, obviously Zeke does still have touchdown potential in a explosive Dallas offense, but I don't know if that's enough to warrant an early round selection. Obviously, if you can get him later, go ahead and pick him up. But if we're talking rounds 1 through 5, I don't touch Ezekiel Elliott. We've been seeing an increase in work for backup Tony Pollard, and Tony Pollard saw his touches per game increase by 3 carries a game last
I was gonna
season.
say, I
So if
remember the
anything,
games that I watched last year. Tony Pollard looked pretty
yeah,
damn good from
yeah,
what I
yeah. So
recall.
Tony
So
Pollard seems like he's coming up. Zeke's on the decline. So
I
I'm
remember being
keeping I'm
happy Zeke
keeping
was
Zeke.
out, but then being like, "Oh, what the
Tony
fuck?"
Pollard's pretty good.
I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
what the hell? This isn't what
yeah,
I
yeah.
expected."
I know. It's rough. So next running back I would avoid, J.K. Dobbins for the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously coming off an injury in which he missed all of last year. Now, obviously, I don't see Baltimore handing him the bulk of the carries. I'm real cautious to take any Baltimore running back personally.
That's
because
what I
they
was gonna
employ-
say with Lamar.
Yeah,
You know, it's
yeah.
it's
So
hard to pick
so
a
you've
running
got
back
the Lamar
on
thing, and
that
even though
team.
they do run, even though they do run the football a lot, they employ a running back by committee type of backfield, where you know they'll give
They're
like every
rotating them
guy
in
they've
and
got
out,
like
right?
about 5 or 6. Yeah, exactly. So they're always like having a fresh back in there because they've used like Gus Edwards, they've used J.K. Dobbins, and then they went in the offseason. They picked up Mike Davis, former Niner, former Seattle Seahawk, Mike Davis, and then they also picked up after the Raiders cut him, Kenyon Drake. So there's a lot of good backs there, and obviously Dobbins isn't fully healthy yet. He's questionable to play in week 1. If he does play, I look for him to be real limited. If I'm taking him, it's, you know, if I can get him late, and that's, you know, maybe holding on
I
to him.
wouldn't say at all. I think like you're saying, it's like taking any Ravens running back is just really, in my opinion, if you're playing fantasy, you shouldn't take any Ravens running back.
Yeah, I would certainly recommend against it. Like the one thing I was going to say with Dobbins that might give him some value is he is going to give you some receptions as well. He'll catch some passes as well as, but yeah, I mean, unless he's like a player where you flex in on a bye week, I would definitely stay away from J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah.
Or, you know, as you confirmed as well, any of the Baltimore running backs, whether that be Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, any of them, because I don't see any of them getting a whole lot of touches because, you know, that's just how John Harbaugh is. He just distributes. Third back that I would avoid, this one I think is pretty obvious for a lot of reasons, is Christian McCaffrey. Now, McCaffrey is a fucking beast when he's on the field, but the problem is guy's hardly ever on the field. I mean, the last couple seasons he's dealt with a lot of injuries, making his selection a real gamble. And that's not something I want to bank on. I mean, McCaffrey in a lot of leagues is going to be like one of the top 3 or 4 backs taken because Carolina does run about probably 45% of their offense through that man. But between, you know, catches and
that's why he's always injured.
Probably doesn't help when you're getting that beat up. But Carolina's offense definitely does run through this man. But yeah, like I said, he's been out of the lineup quite a bit. So at this point he's been, you know, a liability, and you know, I just can't count on him to play and field a full 17 game season. So
yeah, I would agree.
I mean,
that's good advice.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're going around to like let's say you get into rounds 6 through 10 and you've got like 2 good running backs already, and McCaffrey's still somehow out there, then maybe take him because you've already got.
That's
like,
not going to happen though. Someone's going to see the name,
right?
I was going to say earlier, like a big rookie mistake is picking players that you like or like your
name
team
value,
specifically,
right.
And trying.
Right.
Oh, it's my team. Like I did that shit last year, and that team was like dead last.
You end up with the whole team on a bye the same week, and that's terrible.
I mean, I had players to sub in that week, but like it still didn't really matter. Like,
usually they're not your best players though.
No, they weren't. They were bad, and I was already bad to begin with. But yeah, that's one thing I can say from experience. It's like, just don't. It's got to be based on nothing, no allegiances with fantasy.
Yeah, I have no allegiance to my team. Like, yeah, I mean, for the second straight year, I drafted Tom Brady as my fantasy quarterback. I mean, I'm a big Brady fan, but it's just like, obviously.
But like, you're not going to go out of your way to draft.
I didn't get Trey Lance.
San
like
Francisco.
Trey Lance was there.
You got George Kittle because George Kittle's worth taking, regardless of if you like the Niners or not. But it works out great for you because you can take. I also did take team.
Robbie Maddock as my kicker. So
well, if he was still available, then I can't blame you for that. I was thinking about taking him too when I got on there, and I was like, nah, we'll.
But I didn't go out of my way to take Niners just for the sake of taking Niners. If I could get the best player available, you know, that's what
exactly.
I did. All right, so Chase Edmonds for the Dolphins. So here's the thing with Chase Edmonds. So Chase Edmonds is another guy that's in a crowded backfield. Now, Miami recently let go of Sony Michel, obviously, and he has since signed with the Chargers. I guess we should have mentioned that earlier. He signed with the Chargers, so they have him now behind Austin Eckler, give them some additional depth. But Chase Edmonds is in a crowded running back room with, most notably, Raheem Mostert, former Niner All-Star, star of the NFC Championship game where he just
Raheem the Dream.
Raheem the Dream, Raheem the goddamn Dream. Also, Myles Gaskin is back there, and Salvon Ahmed. So there's 4 guys that you're planning on getting touches. Chase Edmonds might be the featured guy getting the majority of those touches, but I don't think it's going to be a lot more. And obviously, Mike McDaniel has, being the former Niners offensive coordinator, has great familiarity in Raheem. So if Raheem gets hot, I could see Raheem taking the bulk of the carries easily. Plus, I think Raheem's going into the season as kind of more the backup and, getting paid what he is because, he played in one game last year. He got injured in the opener and then that was it for him. So pretty, he's on a prove it deal right now. Definitely needs to, show that he can still play at a high level. But I definitely wouldn't bank on Chase Edmonds based on that. Chase Edmonds is also the guy making the most money in that backfield, but, often that is not a determining factor. The coach is going to play whoever has the hot hand and whoever is producing. But I personally would stay away from Chase Edmonds early in your fantasy draft. And same trend here. With the crowded running back room, I mean, that is definitely always something to note. You've got to look at that. You got to look at, rosters that are going to employ that more of a back by committee type of thing, because obviously the running backs that are going to get 25, 30 carries a game are going to be like your Jonathan Taylors, your Derrick Henrys. And obviously if you can get those guys, go ahead and get them. I'm not going to include those guys in the top 5 because that would be too easy. I'm going with a little bit more, I don't want to say sleepers because they're all good players, but we'll get into that here in a second. But let's just finish with number 5 on the list of players I would stay away from early in your draft is Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the Kansas City Chiefs. Reason for that being the Chiefs went out and made some additions to their running back room. In addition to having Jerick McKinnon, it actually is Jerick McKinnon this time. Didn't, misspeak for J.D. McKissick. So they do have Jerick, our former player, former Viking as well. They went out and got Ronald Jones, who was, in the backfield with Leonard Fournette in Tampa Bay, who's a good player. And they drafted Isaiah Pacheco. So they've got 4 running backs on the active roster, and they really like Pacheco. Pacheco really impressed Andy Reid in the preseason, and I think that that's going to directly take carries away from what Helaire would be getting. Not to mention Helaire didn't produce as well as he did. He was a little bit banged up, as you tend to be at running back in the NFL pretty much all the time.
Yeah, right. Well, that's why most of these teams like to do that running back by committee thing.
It's not a bad strategy.
It's going to keep them all relatively, hopefully, healthy and fresh. Where when you have one guy like Derrick Henry, which those, or like a guy like AP used to be, those kind of guys that are just like monsters that just keep.
Yeah, I think they call that like a bell cow.
It's like that's rare. Like to find a guy that can play that much and to take that level of beating, it's just like
it's what Kyle was trying to turn Deebo Samuel into.
Yeah, and Deebo's like, nah. I don't want to do that, bro. That's not my job. I want to play more than 3 seasons and have to retire with CTE and who knows? Like that's just a lot.
Absolutely.
Probably too much. I mean, hopefully players don't get CTE that easily, but Jesus.
Yeah, I would hope not. Hopefully that's not a serious thing. I mean, it is a serious, but hopefully it's not easily acquired.
I mean, they've done like things for the helmets and various things too.
Yeah,
I imagine
NFL's always developing new.
Reduce those things.
Yeah, good for the NFL. It takes all of us. The NFL. All right. So now on the flip side of this is the 5 running backs that you absolutely should take early on. These are, call them sleepers, call them whatever the hell you want. I don't really think they're sleepers because, I mean, maybe some of these might surprise you, but let's go ahead and get into them here. So, okay, number 1, Najee Harris. Now, I made a very good run in fantasy football last year on riding the coattails of young Najee Harris. Yes, I did. I ended up going on like a 7-game winning streak at the end of the season off young Najee's back. Now, Najee Harris is whether you're personally a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers or not, which I personally am not, but that's fine. A lot of people are. Najee Harris is phenomenal. Now, as a rookie, they gave this man 307 carries of the football for 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. He also caught 74 passes for 467 yards and 3 touchdowns. So 10 total touchdowns, total of over 1,600 yards. Phenomenal season. And I don't really look for any of that to change because the depth that they have behind him is they've got Anthony McFarland, they've got Benny Snell, and really not much. So the Steelers running back depth behind
I've literally
Najee
never
Harris,
heard of either of those two.
Exactly. And that's why Najee will continue to get, probably close to 400 carries again this season. So if you can get him early, go ahead and scoop up Najee Harris like I did last year. I didn't get him this year. Now, this next guy, I actually drafted myself in fantasy. I was able to get him early on. Is Joe Mixon for the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Joe Mixon coming off a deep run into the Super Bowl last year. Ended up having a phenomenal season for the Bengals. He's another one of those backs that I really like that gives you the ability to not only produce on the ground, but also, line up as a receiver and catch passes in the flat or out of the backfield. Last year, Mixon had his best season ever when he started 16 of 17 games, carried the football 292 times for 1,205 yards, had 13 rushing touchdowns. And then he also had, 42 catches, 314 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. So a total of 16 touchdowns. So he went off last year. I'm hoping that, more of the same happens this year. Obviously, if that's the case, I'm going to have a great year in fantasy football. But I really like Joe Mixon, and he seemed to get better as the season went on. Like, as we're getting later into, October, November, December, he started having more 100-yard games, and he was really, that whole Bengals offense, towards the end of the season, I'm sure you remember, really got rolling. They beat the Chiefs
they really
in
did.
the regular
season. It was
season.
surprising how good that they were playing. I've never seen the Bengals look that good.
Yeah, Joe Beasy, Joe Burrow, he's he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the league right now. So definitely got him feeding the rock to Joe Mixon. So if you can pick up Joe Mixon, go ahead and get him. Next guy I have is San Diego's Los Angeles. It's hard to break that. The Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler. But so Eckler, obviously. I'm sure this isn't going to surprise anybody. He's been, one of the top running backs as far as the ability to catch passes for the last several seasons. He ended up having 70 catches last year for 647 yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. And then, not to be outdone, on the ground, he had 911 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. So a total of 20 touchdowns. His yards were a little bit lower. He's more around 1,500 yards than about the 16 or 17 that Mixon and Najee had. But still, obviously touchdowns are going to be the ultimate value in fantasy. Yards help you too, but touchdowns are what you ultimately want, that touchdown. And, fifth guy, this is probably the one kind of dark horse guy on the list, is he was recently named the starter for the Houston Texans, Dameon Pierce. So he's a rookie. He was originally came in listed as third on the Texans depth chart, but he's now made his way all the way up to the starting role. Obviously, the Texans last year had the league's worst running attack. They ranked 32nd in the league. Only 1,422 yards total, which a lot of the running backs that we mentioned had more than that, just themselves. Texans averaged 3.4 yards per rush and only had 8 rushing touchdowns. But they had running backs like Rex Burkhead, and I can't think of who else they had at the time, but it wasn't good options. You know, nobody that's really going to wow you or be a household name. So he is pretty much expected. Like, they've got Rex Burkhead and Marlon Mack on the roster. He's far and away the best player that they have. I expect them to feed him early on. So obviously kind of a sleeper dark horse player. I don't think he's going to be taken early in a lot of leagues. So if you can, definitely, you know, go ahead and draft Dameon Pierce early on. I think he'll be a real good player, and I think you'll be happy with his production. Obviously, the Texans are a team that, outside of Brandon Cooks, their receiver, they don't have a lot of offensive weapons. So ball's got to go somewhere. And usually when your team's not offensively good, you run the football a lot. So pick them up if you can. But yeah, join us next week. We will do quarterbacks, 5 quarterbacks that you want to pick up and 5 quarterbacks that you definitely want to stay away from. At that point, we'll probably have a game in the book. So we'll go over that too. But yeah, join us next week. Hope you guys like this fantasy segment. And that's going to do it for the Extra Point Show this week. If you like what you saw, make sure that you like and subscribe. Definitely helps us out a lot. And it'll keep you up with the latest and greatest content. So I hope you enjoy the show. Have a great night, everybody.